Regina, Mater misericordiae, vita dulcedo, estes nostra salve.
The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to John. Thomas, called Didymus, one of the 12, was not with them when Jesus came. So the other disciples said to him, "We have seen the Lord." But Thomas said to them, "Unless I see the mark of the nails in his hand, and put my finger into the nail marks, and put my hand into his side, I will not believe." Now a week later his disciples were again inside, and Thomas was with them. Jesus came, although the doors were locked, and stood in their midst and said, "Peace be with you." Then he said to Thomas, "Put your finger here and see my hands, and bring your hand and put it into my side, and do not be unbelieving, but believe." Thomas answered him and said to him, "My Lord and my God." And Jesus said to him, "Have you come to believe because you have seen me? Blessed are those who have not seen and have believed." The Gospel of the Lord.
There's a great story about St. Thomas recorded in the lives of the saints, which in the lives of the saints they tell you is probably not true. However, it's better than any other anecdote someone could probably tell about their life, or even maybe to ground a reference to Thomas and this gospel. So I just want to have some fun with this morning. And so, according to the legend, St. Thomas, after Pentecost, all the disciples are casting lots to figure out who's going to go to which part of the world to evangelize. And so Thomas draws the lot that sends him to India. And so he says to the other guys, "Sorry, not going." And he refused, and he was adamant about it after a number of requests. However, the legend says that Christ appeared to a merchant who was in Jerusalem at the time, and he had the king of India's seal with him. And the king of India, so in the name of the king of India, he was looking for a builder and a carpenter. And Jesus appeared to this merchant, and he said, "I have a servant for you. I will let you have him. I'll sell him to you for 20 pieces of silver." He doesn't even get what Jesus got, the gold. And so this servant finds Thomas, and he says, "Are you Thomas, of the servant of Jesus of Nazareth?" And he says, "Yes, I am." And he says, "I have a contract here signed by your master. You're coming to India with me." So he went. Not even protesting. And so he arrives in India, and the king is just delighted to see this guy. And he says, "What are your skills?" He says, "I'm a carpenter and a builder." He says, "Really?" "Yep." He says, "Good. I'm going to commission you to build me a palace. So I want you to start work right away. I'm giving you here this big bank account to do the job. Go for it." And so he sets about. The king decides he's going on a journey. And Thomas decides, he has a nice palace already. I'm going to use this money to finance my evangelization endeavors. I'm going to feed the poor. I'm going to preach the gospel. I'm going to conduct healing services, heal the sick, drive out demons. So he goes to work about ministry quite zealously. Of course, he spends all the king's money, and there's no palace. And the king comes home after his journey, and he says, "Where's my palace?" And he says, "You can't see it now." "Well, when am I going to see it?" "When you go to heaven. Because with what you gave me, I was able to care for the poor, and that built you a huge palace in heaven. And so the king, angry, throws Thomas in jail and says, as soon as I decide, you will be flayed alive. Meanwhile, the king's brother dies. And the king's brother is allowed to go back to earth and appear to his brother, the king. And he says to the king, his brother, in this vision, he says, can I buy your house in heaven off of you? It's quite beautiful. And he says, what house in heaven? He says, you have a large palace in heaven. And he said, I'd like to buy it from you. I mean, it's that nice. And the king says, no. He releases Thomas from jail, and his whole family is converted, and all of his subjects. And they all live happily ever after. And eventually, Thomas is flayed alive, and that's how he dies as a martyr. What's interesting in all this is a couple things. Relates to the letter to the Ephesians. We are fellow citizens with the holy ones, members of the household or palace of God in heaven. In him also we are being built into a building place for God's Spirit. And this is what the apostles have given us. And this is our legacy. We are their legacy of a grand temple being built. Sometimes, as I said yesterday, we appear as a rickety boat, and yet God sees us as a wonderful palace for heaven. And so, a little bit more interesting here is the one who had to see to believe with this king invites this king to believe without seeing. And he has a hope for a palace in heaven. And isn't that how we are? We don't see, but we believe. And we live in a hope for a palace in heaven. And yet the hope is already partially fulfilled as we are living temples of the Holy Spirit, living tabernacles where the Eucharist can reside by each communion. We are a stellar palace for God. Blessed is the one then who sees and has not yet believed. Blessed is those who have not seen yet have believed. And that's you.
Regina Celi, letare